Cool. Welcome, everyone. It's great to be with you all this morning. My name is the Reverend Bryson White, and I'm the Regional Faith Coordinator for Faith in the Valley. And up front, I would like to ask that you please excuse the lighting in my room. I'm traveling, and the room that I'm in, the lighting isn't really all that great. So I'll be kind of in the dark having this wonderful conversation with Pastor BK Woodson. So again, welcome to the Faith in the Valley Justice interview series. Faith in the Valley and our community partners, we believe in a different and better future, that it is possible for the Central Valley if we work together. A future in which everyone is included, treated as sacred, has the chance to thrive and live healthy and decent lives. A future in which no one is seen as less than or lives in fear because of the color of their skin, their legal status, or the amount of money they earn. A future where everyone has access to good jobs, clean air, clean water, alternatives to incarceration, quality healthcare, and safe neighborhoods. The Faith in the Valley Justice interview series, which you are tuning into this morning, they are a set of conversations that highlight the role of faith and justice organizing in the Central Valley. We have discussed the role of interpretations of Scripture and its role in doing justice, the intersection between religion and mass incarceration, Christian perspectives on abolitionism, conceptions of nonviolence, the revolutionary theology of Fannie Lou Hamer, and Palestinian solidarity, amongst other topics. Today, we are with Servant Brian K. Woodson of San Jose. And even though he's not in the Valley, he is a great brother who is doing great work. Excuse me, he's not in San Jose. He's doing great work in the Bay Area. And so he's going to be talking to us today around the connections between preaching and social justice. And so Servant Brian K. Woodson, Sr. began adulthood as a commissioned officer in the United States Air Force, where he was a designer and a project officer. He left the USAF and answered the call to ministry and is currently the founding pastor of Oakland's own Bay Area Christian Connection. Servant BK is an organizer and the director of clergy development at Faith in Action East Bay, formerly named Oakland Community Organizations, and the director of the Emerging Leaders Program at the Leadership Institute at Allen Temple. He is an ardent advocate for human rights and a writer and published author of many articles and the devotional book, Meditations of a Madman, The Musings of a Hated Man Loving God. His long-awaited first novel, Purple Land, has been recently released and is available online and wherever fine books are sold. I love that last line, Pastor.
Yeah. That's how it's said, wherever fine books are sold. Right?
Yeah, that's right. So welcome, Pastor BK. We're so grateful to have you, to have this conversation. And if we can just get started. And so those who are listening, I'm going to ask BK questions. He'll respond as thoroughly as he desires. And we're just going to have a cool conversation with the really good, intelligent brother. So please tune in. He drops a lot of jewels. So the first question, Pastor, is around the vocational call of the pastor. So often in our communities, we hear about the vocational call of the pastor being primarily expressed through marrying and burying our folks. How would you help us think differently about the vocational call of the pastor and addressing structural inequalities, namely in dismantling white supremacy?
Well, thank you, Dr. Bryson White, my reverend and friend. While marrying and burying loved ones, it's essential and very important part of what a pastor does, caring for loved ones, caring for family, helping the family through the celebrations and lamentations of life, right? It's a sacred part of pastoring, but the most important role that a pastor plays is the creation and the maintenance of the imagination, right? Mm-hmm. So what pastors do is we ferment or reestablish or create the story of how the world works, right? Of what and where in the world we as individuals fit, right? And more importantly, what that narrative does, what that story of the world, how does the world work? That's what pastors really do. The narrative about good and evil, love and justice. That's the chief responsibility of the pastor. And every pastor communicates this message, communicates who's right and who's wrong, who's good and who's evil. They do that either passively or they do it actively. And we as pastors are either prophets of the empire or messengers of God. So who are God's people? What is it? And the essential questions of life, right? Well, the essential questions of life are different based on who you're talking to. So an essential question for someone who's leaving the terror and the torment of oppression, trying to escape into freedom, the essential questions of life are like, can I eat? Can I make it across this border, right? Can I find a place to live that's safe? The essential question for African Americans, right? African American males and females walking down the street in the ghettos and the hollers and the hoods of America are very, very different than the parapets of the elite, than a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, you know, Anglo-Saxon, European descended person. That person is not worried about whether the policeman rolling down the street just is having a bad day and going to come and kill him. So the pastors have to enter into this realm and say, this is what right is, this is what wrong is, and this is the side that God is on, right? Right. Yeah. So
yeah, no, that's really good. I love the answer around the imagination. You know, so often pastors kind of fall into just the thinking of like you just have to communicate doctrine, right? You know what I mean, without cultivating the spiritual imagination of congregants, because you know the narrative of the world is inviting us into a particular way of imagining the world, one that's predicated on various types of hierarchies, namely racial hierarchy, gendered, sexual, you know, hierarchies, class hierarchies. So I love the response of cultivating this sort of alternative imagination to invite people into a different story. Yeah,
absolutely.
I love that. Yeah. Cool. So the second question, and then we can, you know, feel free, you know, to talk longer, and then we can, you know, add different questions as we go too that might organically arise. The second question is around prophetic hermeneutics, which is, you know, tethered to the one that we just question that we just answered. So much of biblical interpretation within Christian churches are deployed for the purposes of maintaining or enhancing the power of those who already exercise power and deepen the vulnerability of those who already live in precarity. Can you help us think about your hermeneutical approach to the biblical text that lends your ministry to protect the vulnerable and challenge structural oppressions?
Right. An excellent question, and wonderfully articulated, right? So hermeneutic, right? A hermeneutic is a big word for describing how we as readers of a holy text translate what that text is saying into our everyday. How do we understand what this text means? That's what a hermeneutic is. And I think that what has happened is that we have been deceived. There's a subtle system of miseducation that all clergy are invited to embrace. All clergy who are trained and those who disdain the seminaries, right, are still subtly have been subverted into believing something that is not the gospel of Jesus Christ. The gospel of Jesus Christ, Luke chapter 4, verse 8, you know, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to give good news to the poor, right? The opening, to reopening of the sight of the blind, right? And to setting the captives free. And we have like, if we say that at all, we religiousise it. And most often we don't say it. We don't realize Christianity today does not live into any Christ notion, but Christianity today is engaged in a hermeneutic of a misinterpretation of Paul, of the epistles. And I think what has happened is the post-Constantinian narrative. So you know, Dr. White, that Constantine comes, has this vision or whatever, so we're told, under this banner you shall conquer, and Christianity, a former sect of Judaism, right? All of a sudden becomes this authorized religion, right? It becomes a part of the state. It becomes kosher with the empire. Now that is a Y in the road from those who are followers of Jesus, who and those of us who have become followers of Jesus are often confused because the Constantinian appropriation of Christianity and bastardization of Christianity is all we know and hold. So we have preachers who are preaching from the standpoint and the perspective of the empire, which Jesus never did, right? And what are the signs that we're doing this? Well, one of the signs that we're doing it is the very crucifixion itself, the cross itself. So Rita Nakashimi Brock, in her book, beautiful book, Saving Paradise, she had this conversation with someone who told her that, well, before the 10th century in Christendom, they didn't do the cross. There were no crucifixions. And she said, oh, no, that's not true, right? So she, as a researcher, as a scholar, went to look at it. And what she found was that the first 10 centuries of Christianity was living into paradise, right? That Jesus came to show us the way into paradise, right? To live in paradise. And that the imagination of the first Christians were not to die and go to heaven, but to live in and engage and birth heaven on earth, right? That's what we do. But Constantine gave us this notion of the crucifixion, or post-Constantine, right? The crucifixion and the salvific nature of suffering, right? Post-Constantinian Christianity has this imprimatur that says essentially we can abandon the earth, that our ultimate goal, our ultimate desire is heaven away from the earth. And it has led to a disinvestment and releasing our responsibilities for our own reality.
That's right. That's right.
In lieu and in hope of this imagined heaven that Jesus didn't talk a lot about, right? So when you ask about my hermeneutic, my friend, the late Dr. James Noel, he wrote, James, wonderful brother. He talks about the unique challenge that we as African Americans have to appropriate, interpret, and incorporate a notion of God, right, from our lived experience, particularly the Middle Passage. How do ones, we talked about the difference between African Americans and Anglo Americans in our society today as we imagine it. But understand that birthed in the African American soul is this moment coded in our DNA when we absolutely lost our humanity. The very nature of our existence was changed from human being, from the human race, and placed in the animal kingdom. And without language, without family, without roots, how then are we to imagine God? So my hermeneutic, and I think that what the evangelicals have done, what a lot of what goes for Christianity today, a hermeneutic that is not in dialogue with one's reality is not really a hermeneutic, but it's merely a regurgitation of the justification for our incarceration and oppression, right?
Mm-hmm.
So any hermeneutic that doesn't lead to your freedom, any hermeneutic that doesn't incorporate the authentic lived experience of our oppression is just that a loop for our oppression to continue. And that's what Peter was saying in 2 Peter 2:22, right? That the dog has returned to his own vomit. So some of our religions, some of our hermeneutics are just us eating our own oppression.
Oof.
And what we have to do is we have to be in dialogue with what's real for us, right? So we have to ask that question: God, are you for us? Are you for the oppressed, or are you not? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I cannot imagine white people in heaven. Now, and people are gonna get upset with me. I don't know what it is. I'm not saying, like, I have some friends who are Caucasian. I love some people who are Caucasian, but there can't be white people in heaven. Because if there are white people in heaven, that justifies my oppression on the earth. And that won't be heaven to me. That won't be heaven to me. You know what I'm saying?
Very Malcolmian in the sense of the white man's heaven is a black man's hell. And that's yeah. Mm-hmm.
So as we read the text, we have to read it in dialogue and confrontation with our realities. And the hardest thing to do, and the most honest thing to do, is, we have privilege, even though we're oppressed. And we have to guard against our proclivities to take on the supremacist notions of others, right? So I reject, and I have learned to, and some of my friends have helped me learn how to reject supremacy itself. White supremacy is bad, but white supremacy is just an expression of supremacy. It is one expression of the supremacy. When I think that God, and we can see this in the creation, right? The creator and the creator are very related, right? And the creator did not create something antithetical to the creator, right? So what do we see in the creation? What we see is interconnected interdependence. Right? The poem that I write, and one day will be famous for, I'm gonna be famous for because I'm saying it on your live stream, is the flower only flirts with the bee on behalf of the tree, right? So a flower is that, I have a fruit tree, so the flower would bloom, and the bee is coming along doing its bee thing. The bee is not really invested in the flower. The bee is not invested in the fruit of the tree. The bee is just doing its bee thing. But in the bee being a bee, it allows the tree to be a tree, right? And so in nature, we see this interconnectedness and not this supremacy.
That's right.
So what we have to do is where we are supreme, where we have, we must look to give. And where we are without, we must look to get. But it's got to be both. It's got to be so the hermeneutic, the perspective has to be an honest one, in that, yes, I've been oppressed. Yes, I have oppression in my DNA. Yes, I'm trying to appropriate my full humanity. And part of that is understanding that I am not totally good and I'm not totally evil. Okay?
That's right.
And neither is my oppressor. They're not totally good. They're not totally evil. So let's get in conversation. And our hermeneutic, which is our conversation with the text, must facilitate a conversation with our reality and our conversation with others.
Yeah, wow. That's such a rich answer, because I really appreciate it. There's so much there. Begin at the beginning of your response with Dr. Brock. Um, I haven't read her text, but I do know that a part of her critique of how her sort of historical analysis of how the cross came to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that in the early church, that most of the images around Jesus were around the dove, right? Right, and it's and and different images that were sort of central to the life of the church
Yeah,
and
yeah. So it's
church.
the, yeah, she talks about the images, not just of the dove, which is the Holy Spirit, but
Mhm.
also of paradise, of the rivers, the rivers coming together, right? And
Mhm.
trees. So a tree was a truer symbol of Christianity than the cross, right?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, okay.
yeah,
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 well,
yeah.
that's really good. Yeah, and then when you got to talk about Constantine, right? I'm just reminded of Cornel West's, beautiful chapter in Democracy Matters around Constantinian Christianity, right? So you have this larger sort of meta narrative of Constantinian Christianity that then is expressed within the United States through plantation Christianity, right? And so many pastors of all racial and ethnic groups ingest plantation logics and regurgitate them, as you aptly pointed, return to their own vomit. And it's sort of, it's deeply troubling when Black pastors embrace plantation logics and preach that from the pulpit, which lends to deepening oppressions of the congregants that that they do care about, right? Majority time. And so we really are. So our approach to hermeneutics can really be life-giving, if I'm hearing you correctly, and for the undoing of the problems of the world, or it can be death dealing and land on people in very destructive manners. I mean, I think about so many folks, our same gender loving siblings in our congregations who experience hermeneutical and preaching terror from the pulpit, on a consistent basis, or for all Black folks experiencing the um, the justifications of our oppressions. And that's just it's disheartening when it comes from Black folks. It's unfortunate that from my life experience, I come to have expected that from the majority of the evangelical and mainline world, but it's always sort of disheartening to hear those same logics reinforced by our own. But it seems like there's an emergence of younger Black folks who are either in the church or as clergy, or in the streets as organizers, who are challenging and pushing back against all of these oppressive hermeneutical approaches. I think about during the Ferguson uprising, the signs that young folks were carrying that said James Cone was right. You know what I mean? And how crucial of a statement that is in the midst of that uprising, that James Cone is right. The depth of that theological statement, you know what
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
was
yeah,
was profound.
yeah, yeah. And we have to be careful when you talk about our LGBTQ brothers and sisters,
Mhm.
um, um, and same gender loving folk. We can be hierarchical and supremacist as theologians. The honest, if you can see yourself, if we can see ourselves sitting down with a text and asking someone, help me understand this, someone who's not been to school, not been trained, you know what I mean, who has a totally different perspective. I think we are on the right track. I think there's a verse in the Bible in the Old Testament where it says Moses was the humblest man on the planet, right?
Mm.
Earth. And that humility, and this is what gets difficult for African American. This is what gets difficult for all oppressed folks. This is the same reason that some women have problems with Ephesians and that submission, a word that we see humility as a powerlessness, that humility is powerless, right? And humility is deference to power over. But there's a different kind of humility. There is the humility as expressed and seen in a parent to an infant, right? Infant does not have any more power than the parent, but the parent humbles themselves, right? Get up in the middle of the night, you know what I mean? Change that diaper again. It's not like I want to change this diaper, you understand? but so and this also makes it difficult for us, because in order to embrace a kind of life-giving humility, we have to first create within ourselves and embrace for ourselves our own full humanity and divinity, right? And then out of our largesse, out of our comfort with ourselves, out of the affirmation that we already have from God, we can deal with your stuff. We can deal with the fact that you don't like us. We can deal with the fact that you don't see us as human, because we already know. Listen, Jesus, most people didn't see Jesus for who he was, right? But he never lost sight of who he was.
That's right.
Right. All right.
Yeah, no, that's right. No, that's really good for those who are listening. We're talking with Pastor B.K. Woodson, Executive Director of Faith in Action East Bay, and so and also just another tidbit. If you're just now tuning in, the lighting in my room isn't really that great, so I'm kind of like talking out of the darkness. You know what I mean, with my friend here. So yeah, cool. Let's hit this third question. Pastor. So this one is around disrupting the Christian capitalist machine, right? So all these questions are interconnected that we're talking through here. Many of the issues that vulnerable communities, namely Black communities, face are rooted in an economic system that is based on our exclusion or even our predatory inclusion, right? Exploitative capitalism is undergirded by religious orientations that justify the exploitation of workers in this country, right? Which is always, which is deeply racialized. Can you help us think about how Christianity has come to be aligned with an unjust economic system that works for a few at the expense of the many?
Right. This is an extension of the conversation we've already begun about post-Constantinian Christianity, right? So the late Prathia Hall Wynne taught me, I heard her say, we are the capital upon which capitalism is based. So modern so-called Christianity, modern evangelicalism is an apostasy. It is apostasy, principally because of its hypocrisy, right? So it's very simple. Christianity extols the virtue of justice, love, mercy. But these same evangelicals, right, abandon and welcome injustice, right? These same evangelicals embrace hatred, right? I had a crisis of faith. I had many, but one of my crises of faith was on November 10th of 2016, wasn't it? When I read that 83% of evangelicals voted for Donald Trump. Well, I'm from an evangelical denomination, right? I'm on the left side of that denomination. They don't talk to me much, but if they would talk to me, they'd say they love me, but they don't never call. They'll never say that to me, but whatever. But when I saw that 83% of evangelicals voted for someone, I know evangelicals, and evangelicals are wonderful people. The people I know, white Swedish people, they're good people. And they don't stand for misogyny. They definitely don't like rapists, right? Or people, they are fastidious about business. They don't like liars and cheats, right? They don't like folk who are duplicitous in their business dealings. They don't like anything, everything that Trump exuded they are against, except his white supremacy. That's the only thing that was attractive to my evangelical brothers and sisters. And that's why they coded him in languages of redemption. You know, he could get saved. Everybody sins. They recognize they never celebrated his sins.
He's a baby Christian, right? Yeah.
But they were attracted to, whether they were conscious of it or not. And this was what I'm talking about when we talk about hermeneutic, being able to get into dialogue with people who see the world different from you, and understanding that unless we get in dialogues and conversations that we are open to hearing voices that don't come out of our own head, we will never appropriate or approach the wisdom that God has for us, right? But this modern evangelicalism, this Christianity so-called, is an apostasy, right? And Christianity today, as it falls apart, right? Churches are not being full today. That prosperity garbage, that prosperity myth, man, that's falling apart all over. Right. And here's why I think Christianity is writ large, American Christianity writ large is flawed, even in our African American churches, is because it fails to see the foundation upon which this nation and this nation's translation of Christ is based. So this nation is based on, I call 3 pillars that are the foundation of our nation. You can see it in our Constitution. You can see it in our laws today. You can see it in January 6th. You can see it, it permeates. 3 things. One is extermination. The second is expropriation. And the third is exploitation. So this nation is founded in the near extermination, the genocide of indigenous people, right? So we embrace that as a value, as okay. We never apologize for it. And there are pipelines going in now that are going to go through holy places in indigenous territory.
Under the Biden administration.
Under the Biden administration, right? Because extermination of the lives and the memories of people is part of what this nation is founded on. And then once they wholesaled, had this program of exterminating the indigenous population, they then embraced expropriation. So this land is your land, this land is my land. No, that didn't include you and me, brother.
That's right. That's right. Not at all.
So the whole notion of land ownership is a theology that is really against what the Bible says, right? Oh man, I wish I had time to tell you that the property prescriptions, and I studied this in grad school, the property prescriptions in the Old Testament and the New cannot, I have not found a scholar that understood what they were talking about until I read John Hope Franklin's History of African Americans. And I read in the first chapter African notions of land. And I said, oh, there it is right there. There it is right there, right? So this notion that the land itself has a relationship with God, the divine, and we have a relationship with the land, it has to be responsible throughout generations. And land cannot be commodified, right? That is a deeply biblical notion, deeply African notion, but it's not an American notion.
That's right.
Now, so we expropriated land, and then we exploit labor. You know, the most horrid case is enslavement, right? So exploitative capitalism, which is I don't want folk to lose the meaning from the ism, but this notion of venerating or even accepting extermination, expropriation, and exploitation as normative is a deep flaw in the ability to understand what Christ is all about, and therefore a deep impediment for understanding what we are to be about.
Yeah, I love this your connection to African notions of land, and even sort of returning back to our conversation on hermeneutics. This very anthropocentric reading of scripture that places human beings above creation versus as a part of creation. These interpretations undergird a capitalist economy that literally has us on the cliff of extinction, where the earth is not valued. It's only valued as it pertains to its production of capital, right? And so, the belief that the earth is alive and an entity in and of itself isn't even on the radar of most Christians. You know what I mean? And the notion of the earth itself having a relationship with God is foreign to folks. I mean, that becomes like a pejorative thing. I mean, even coming out of your generation, right? Like people used to call people like tree huggers, right? You know what I'm saying? Like it's a pejorative sort of notion, but the earth itself has its own life force that is connected to the creator of the universe. And we participate in that life force of the earth. And when people in our churches talk like that, they try to label you or pin you with sort of that's sort of a demonic spirituality. And I'm like, wow, how inverted things have become, that if someone is talking about being a caretaker of the ecosphere,
Right.
you know what I mean, that's somehow ungodly. It's a strange sort of twist.
Yeah, we got it upside down. We absolutely have it done upside down. So we talked about, I mentioned about the creator and the creation. So one thing is true about us as human beings, and I want to just make this point and kind of amplify what you just said. So, when we get sick, we get a fever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And why do we get a fever? Well, essentially, and this is just from someone who doesn't know anything, right, about biology or whatever, but I think this is true, that a virus or some such in our body, and we are delicately balanced, our temperature goes up to kill that virus, right? And a virus is something that doesn't have a proper function in our bodies. We have billions of viruses in there, and most of them are doing what they're supposed to do, right? But and not harming us. But there's some virus, like this new virus, right? COVID-19 is nouveau virus. That's like, oh no, I'm going to kill this host, right? So our body has a fever to burn out that virus, right? And the fever, if the fever gets too hot, right? They try to calm it down because it'll burn us all out. We'll just listen. The earth has a fever, and the virus
is us.
It's the virus are the capitalists. The virus are those who have been digging in her and polluting her air and fouling her water. And it said, I gotta get, 8 billion, about almost 8 billion people. Now it's time for me to reduce that. And if we are to be translators and communicators of what God has to say to us and to generations coming, we have to be aware that this earth right now is about to eject us. Right? And my argument, my sense of the prophets of the Bible was not that they were divinators, not that they were like folk who had these crazy visions of whatever. Not that they never had visions, but that they were readers of their context.
Right.
No, the Assyrians are going to kick our butts. Egypt is no longer on the rise. The Assyrians are, looking at their armies, and then now the Babylonians, they're going to really, they're just looking at, And we have to have that. We have to embrace that as a prophetic exercise, looking at the extant realities and then translating that to people who are not looking at it. Global warming is real. Climate change is real. California's on fire. Right? That Antarctica had triple digits. The permafrost is melting, right? This is dialed in, right? So
yeah, that's really good. And contemporary, and I'm gonna say so-called prophets who are really working on behalf of American hegemony, on behalf of American empire, want to locate the divine judgment that may be coming or has come, however folks have interpreted it, onto this country, onto vulnerable populations. So it's never the capitalist, it's never white supremacy, it's never rampant militarism, it's never the US's intervention into foreign countries, it's never the US involved in the international drug trade. You know what I'm saying? It's never these things. It's always the person the woman who has an abortion, it's a feminist, right. It's a black person who is organizing for political change, or it's queer folk. It's always their own domestic and internal enemies, right. In the culture wars that they deem as the problem of the undoing of this country. And it's never the people who hold the levers of power, who pull those. And so, I remember when 9/11 happened, and the so-called prophet, Pat Robertson, who's not a prophet, he just works on behalf of American capitalists and American empire and white supremacy. all those three things.
And Israel, yeah.
And Israel, you know what I mean, and the Zionist government in Israel. He came out and immediately was like, oh, it's because of homosexual folks that 9/11 happened, right? Not because of the US's imperial ambitions and the blowback that creates. It's because of a domestic enemy, or when a flood happens, along the coastal lines. It's not because we are pillaging Mother Earth. It's because of Black folks fighting for freedom, right? You know what I mean? Like, that's why God is sending storms, not because of the activities that have structured our nation in a way that we all participate in the destruction of the environment in some small way to larger ways. It's not that, right? It's, the domestic enemy that they don't like, that they continually demonize. And this is why, conversations like these work, like you're doing in the Bay Area, work that Faith in the Valley is doing public theology, why it's so important to combat these ideas, both at the level of organizing for power and at the level of ideas. And at the level, to better put than the level of ideas, the way you framed it, at the level of imagination. Right. You know what I mean? And that invitation. Right. Yeah. Cool. Let's hit this fourth question. We're at about 11:45. We have a few more minutes together. So the fourth question is around the role of the church and building power in our communities. I mean, just I'll pause for a moment. We're multi-faith organization, so we know that power building, isn't sort of constitutive to Christian communities, but we're talking about the role of the church in our conversation. So the role of the church in building power in our communities, while providing an analysis for how we got here, right? The deconstructive move is critically important for freedom movements. Providing insight into how to galvanize people for the purposes of liberation is also paramount. So can you help us think about the role of the church in building deep power in our communities?
Yes. Thank you for that question. It's incredible and a critical question. So here we go. First, I believe it is true that problems are a conversation about power, that problems, whether they are great problems like climate change, or the problem of, can you get your clothes out the dry cleaners? All power is a conversation and an implication all problems are an implication of power. If you have sufficient power, you don't have a problem, right? So what if I'm like trying to get change together to get my dry cleaning out? I've got a problem. I'm looking all over the house. If I got money in the bank, money in my pocket, I don't think about going to the cleaners. I just go get it when I want to. So all of our problems are comments on our power. Now, if we had the sufficient power, what would the church need? And I think I would argue that from from all religious perspectives, that all religions are in dialogue with problems and power, right? Wherever they come out, whether they're going to heaven or like the Heaven's Gate, whatever, they're in this conversation about power and in this conversation about the problems that the constituents, the congregations, the members are dealing with. So I want to throw it into three categories or three words, quite simply, when we talk about now, what do we do, right? How do we get better? How do we address the problems? Three things: believe, belong, begin. Believe, belong, begin. Believe. What we believe is essential. And what we believe, we have to have, not only before we have a conversation with what we believe, we have to question what we believe. And we've been talking about this already. You know, when we talk about hermeneutic, we talk about the past. When we talk about our extant economic systems, we're asking questions about what we believe and why we believe it, right? And so we ought to engage in a process of building consensus about what we believe about the future. Do we believe we want to live? Do we believe that we're stronger together? Do we believe in our own full humanity and the humanity of the other, right? Because otherizing is a temptation for all of us, because otherizing is a cheap and an imaginary way of gaining power, right? So what do we believe? And I think we have to have conversations about what we believe and come to some conclusions about the story that we're going to engage. There you are.
There we go.
That's all different.
And that's all I needed to do this whole time was turn to the left.
No, that's prophetic, brother. That's it. That was all a setup. That we're in the darkness until we turn to the left.
Hey, that's right.
That's the word right there. That's the sermon.
Hey, that's right.
That's right. Turn to the left. Punch up, don't punch down. Turn to the left. That's all. Right. So we have to believe. We have to believe. And I would suggest that all of our actions, hear me clearly, all of our actions, all of everyone's actions stem from what they believe. And I can be even more specific. Even the actions that are wrong, even the things that we agree that we shouldn't do personally, right? Those actions come out of our belief of what is necessary for us to live. Right? So we have to have a good conversation about what we believe, and we have to build a story that our children and our loved ones can believe in, right? And then we have to belong. So belonging helps us avoid stupid beliefs. You know, belonging helps us get away from believing that I am better than you, right? Belonging to each other, belonging to the earth, right? Because the earth is like a dog trying to shake off some water now, you know what I mean? And we have to understand, we have to be the droplets of water that say to the dog, no, you need us. You know, I'm gonna moisturize you, you know, I'm gonna help you feel better. we have to have belief, and we have to begin to belong to each other and not otherize each other and not demonize each other and search for the humanity in other, all while we protect one another from the ravages of those that don't care about us at all. We have to belong. We have to have a sense of belonging that releases us from the imagination that money is real. Huh? Money is not real. And we saw in Oakland, I see activists fighting over city budgets. We got to take it from the police. No, we got to take it from this. You know, don't take it from anywhere. Demand more. When capitalists, when bankers get into problems, they always can find money for themselves, right? Mm-hmm. So we have to belong to each other and hone each other's beliefs on each other's behalf. And then we have to begin. And this is kind of simple. It's just, you know, if we strike out, the thing about a baseball game, you know, you're going to get a couple of at-bats, right? And we ought to look at our lives as at-bats. We ought to look at our lives as every day we wake up, we get to begin again, right? We get to begin again. Every sunrise is a new beginning. So we have to hold on to our beliefs. And every time we get knocked down, begin again, get up again. Every time we fail in belonging, begin again. Just keep beginning, right? And that's another word for the resurrection. See, the power of Jesus Christ in a word for me is that he successfully subverted the Roman government through love, through believing and belonging. You know, he taught, and the resurrection itself is a statement that no one can stop me from beginning again. Because the only thing the empire has is the threat of killing you. and if you can live after you're dead, if you can live after you are being killed. And this beginning is a new translation, a new hermeneutic of resurrection. It's a new kind of understanding that, no, I'm going to begin again and again and again. And when I leave this planet, in my children, I'll begin and begin and begin again. And we are looking 7 generations down the line of beginning again, right? Mm-hmm. And we might be back to horses and buggies. We might not have cars anymore. We might not have computers anymore. But if we believe we belong, we can begin to create the world that is what I think Christ intended. And that's what the church should be about. And that's what all religions, I think, should be about.
Amen. Amen. Thanks so much, Pastor BK. This is such a rich conversation. I hope for those who were able to tune in, we're blessed by this conversation. This will also be housed on the Faith in the Valley Facebook page, the Faith in the Valley web page, and we will send this to our Faith in the Valley listserv for people who would like to tune in and listen up. Pastor BK, thank you so much. There's a lot to reflect on and to chew on, and I really love the closing frame of believe, belong, and begin again. That's just a very great and sort of simple way to consolidate a lot of deep thoughts, you know what I mean, for us to chew on. So so grateful for you, brother, and grateful for your ministry in the Bay Area. And we pray that as the Spirit moves, that the Spirit continues to raise up more freedom fighters across the globe to create a world of belonging, where we do belong to the earth, where we do belong to one another, and we understand that we all belong to God. So,
amen. And thank you for having me. Thank you for extending to me an opportunity to do what I love most, is talk about God and things like this. And also thank you for the lesson that I will take from this, and that is, when you find yourself in the darkness, move left.
Hey, move left. That's right. And purple. Am I pronouncing it right? Purple End.
Yeah, Purple End.
Purple End. Check it out on. You can get it on anywhere where fine books are sold. All right, there, brother.
All right. God bless, man.
Peace. Let's see. Hold on.